Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today as we head into an extended weekend for the storm emergency piled upon another global emergency due to the COVID-19 or coronavirus. It's important, I think, for all members of our community to understand that we take this very seriously. This is a global emergency. Every country is affected for sure, even those who are not reporting that they've got it. We can assume that all of humanity, one way or another, in our world of today are vulnerable to the spread of this virus. So we take it seriously. On the other hand, we're prepared and well prepared, and we continually update our preparations. Let me speak to what we're doing exactly. So perhaps many at the university are not aware, we have a standing emergency management team that exercises from time to time, that meets from time to time, even between emergencies, to always make sure we've got plans to deal with whatever might come up. A lot of the focus of that team is on catastrophes that are more physical in nature, like earthquake, flood, terrorist attack, bomb blast, or threats of any of those things. This is a different kind of emergency, and it's fair to say we have to treat it as an emergency even if we don't know for sure whether anyone's affected here. We have to assume that sooner or later it's going to hit Egypt in a bigger way than it has, and even our campus is a possibility. So we have to prepare. What are we doing? Number one thing in any management of any kind of crisis is communications. Communications, communications, communications. Internally, externally, all the operating units, all the concerned constituencies have to be in touch. Otherwise, you have informal ways. In any case, there will be informal communications known as rumors. And rumors will spread bad information, incorrect communication information, even more quickly than it will spread correct information. So the first thing we did over this past weekend is take our emergency management team and stand up a task force under that whose first priority is communication. It's our COVID-19 task force. It is under our Vice President for Communications and Marketing, Dina Abul-Futuh. Dina convenes us, the senior leadership, which very much includes the academic leader of the university, our provost, Dr. Ihab, to check at least once a day, and so far it's been 2 or 3 times a day, on what we know, what we're hearing from our community, what we're hearing from the authorities, what are the concerns of the community, how about our readiness on our different things, do we need to adjust our policies, are we getting the word out to the community on what to do. So that's the first thing we did. We set up a task force, and its focus is on communications. They started looking at our policies, our operations, our events, and we started from our priorities. What are the priorities we want to sustain at AUC between emergencies, but especially during emergencies? The number one priority, no matter what, is the health, safety, and security of all of our people on campus, our students, our faculty, our staff, our visitors. That's the number one. Closely related, of course, why do we care about all those things? Number two is to sustain our mission, the conduct of our core business, which is the production and the transmission of knowledge. That's what universities do, teaching and learning. And in our case, it's teaching and learning based on research. Those things have to go on. They can only go on if the people conducting them are healthy, and if they are safe, and if they are secure. So those are our guiding priorities. What are we doing to make sure we have health, in this case, protected as much as is possible, and then to continue the mission of our great university? On health, of course, we're following the guidelines of the Government of Egypt Ministry of Health, of the World Health Organization, which has its regional office right here in Cairo, and of the United States Center for Disease Control, which has the lead. The National Institutes of Health of the United States has an infectious disease institute under Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's been on American media daily. We're tracking what they're doing. What are the best practices for mitigating? And now everybody who's watching me right now or listening to me already knows, because you've heard a million times, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. In between washing, if you can find sanitizer anywhere, use that if you can't get near soap and water. We all know that. That's elementary. That will mitigate. Another thing is spacing of people. Because of what we know from science about this virus, we know if you're within close range of someone who's sneezing or coughing or has respiratory problems, you are much more vulnerable. If you're touching surfaces where someone has been coughing, you're vulnerable. If you touch the surfaces within some hours afterwards, those surfaces have to be cleaned. Institutionally, then, we're looking at our operations, doing extra fumigating, extra cleaning of surfaces that people touch. We're reviewing all of the events that we have scheduled that involve crowds, large crowds in close proximity. Which ones would it be prudent to cancel or postpone? So our working group, our task force, which communicates across all our constituencies, are reviewing one by one what should be canceled or postponed. And again, we're taking our cues from what the government of Egypt is doing and putting out there. In emergency planning, it's important to think ahead and set tripwires, play out certain scenarios. So one of the obvious ones is, what if the government of Egypt declares that schools and universities should close? That could be, if cases ramp up in Egypt, something that the government decides. We might decide even more cautiously if we hear of a number of cases of suspected coronavirus on campus. We haven't yet, but if we do, we're not going to sweep that under the rug. We will respond right away. As it is, we're urging people, if you feel sick, stay home and get checked. No questions. Yes, our students and faculty are very committed to going to classes. They don't want to miss them. But this is a global emergency. We will not be immune. We have to assume that if you're feeling sick, there's at least a possibility, we don't know how great the possibility, that you might have coronavirus. If you do have coronavirus, there's a very low possibility of lethality, it seems, so far. And then seeing a doctor will help mitigate how that happens. But you play out those tripwires. So let's say we have a government of Egypt declaration that all universities and schools should close, or even consider closing. We have considered it. We check the US regulatory environment and the Egyptian regulatory environment to see which kinds of online and blended courses will be accredited so that the students will be able to continue with their academic journeys. So far, that's still limited in Egypt, so we haven't gone full scale in our degree programs. We're experimenting in our non-degree programs, for example. So we have several years of developing of the practices and the technologies on a limited basis. This past week and more, under the provost and associate provost, Aziza Lozi, we've been using what we've learned to develop an emergency set of procedures should we have to close. I won't say everything's in place. I don't mean to whitewash or declare we're complacent. On the contrary, we're offering training for faculty members who haven't been using online courses. That's happening these very days. I'm signed up myself because I want the training to see how this will work. And we see this as, at best, a short-term substitute. We don't think AUC is going to go totally online anytime soon. But it may well be necessary to do this for some period of time. Let me emphasize this point about rumor control and communications in time of crisis. We will respond to specific concerns from any member of the community. We primarily rely on our AUC coronavirus webpage on our main webpage. It's very prominently featured. We will put out the facts as we know them. So if you hear rumors, please don't rely on them until you've checked our webpage. We will put out the facts as we know them. And if we don't know, in response to a question, we'll say, we don't know, let us check it out. And we will check things out authoritatively.